I deem him the music industry superhero. Honestly, he has not only saved days, years, but he will continue to save generations of people who are bound to be in this industry. And I mean, from someone who is lecturing criminal law to getting criminals in the music industry.
Yeah, it's not far off, let me tell you. It's not far off. Which royalties are you talking about? Here are the statements. And then I really realized I knew nothing. But you mentioned the 360-degree deal. Now, that's an interesting one because everybody says 360 deals are the devil. Okay, so what is a 360 deal? I mean, I don't know if you know that one of the biggest selling artists in Belgium, in Europe, brace yourself. Brace yourself. You ready for this? You ready for this?
I'm ready.
You ready for this? We need more knowledgeable people in this industry.
Yeah.
You know, there's only one thing more dangerous than a dishonest manager, and that's an incompetent manager.
Ooh.
We're all about sharing the facts and teaching the tricks. Let's talk all things about music, the life of music. Let's engage about the rhythm. Let's talk about our passion for melodies, sound, and those beautiful classics. Let's get educated about these decibels we oh so dearly love. On this podcast, we talk about these politics. Welcome to Music Politricks.
Dumela, exe. Nagalina ke nabusi, baba kulu, baba dese, bariki the queen of Pitori, and welcome to another episode of Music Politricks. This is where we learn everything there is to learn where music is concerned. We are here to share all the facts and, of course, learn all the tricks via our expert guests. Okay, now a big shout out to everybody on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. Make sure that you do review the podcast. Tell us who you'd like to see or the kind of conversations that you would like to have right here on Music Politricks. And another big shout out to everybody on YouTube. Majority of you are watching, right? However, majority of you are not subscribed. So do the right thing, press that subscribe button, press the like, and do the same thing as well, okay? Just let us know what kind of conversations you would like to have where music is concerned. Now, today, we're going to be speaking all things about the legalities of music. We're also going to be speaking about the music industry in South Africa in comparison to what's happening internationally. I am so appreciative. I mean, I'm so grateful, you know, because I deem him the music industry superhero. Honestly, he has not only saved days, years, but he will continue to save generations of people who are bound to be in this industry. He's got experience in various aspects of the music industry. I mean, he's been a band member for the Helicopters and Reason Machine. I'm talking the best of the best when it comes to progressive rock. And look, he's a lawyer, okay? I'm talking an LLB at Wits, graduated cum laude. All right, there's levels to this thing. And one of the people who are behind one of the most iconic music production schools in this country, and that is the Academy of Sound Engineering, the one and only Nick Matzukis. Thank you so much for coming through.
You're very, very welcome, Lucy. Lovely to be here.
Oh man, like this has been such a long time coming, and I know how busy you are. You are a lawyer, firstly, you know, and you've got the Academy of Sound Engineering as well, and so many other things in between. So thank you so much for making the time.
You're welcome. What do you call 30 lawyers at the bottom of the Indian Ocean? A good start.
Oh dear.
Just kidding.
Geez, how does your typical day look like? I mean, we're having this conversation at the beginning of the year. It's still February. What are your typical days looking like at the moment, and when will it start to change?
Yeah, well, every day is an adventure at the moment. It's February. It's the start of the academic year for us at the Academy.
Yeah.
We start lectures in 3 weeks, our first intake as it happens. And so that's a busy time. You can imagine preparing for lectures, getting all the students enrolled, registered.
Sure.
Getting preparations, making sure our studios are all in action and as they should be. So it's a busy time. And of course, my job is to make sure that what I'm delivering to my students this year is current, up to date, and contemporary.
Nice.
Yeah.
You were born in Zimbabwe.
I was.
And 8 years old, you went for violin lessons, whether you practiced or not. Hey, that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah.
What was it like growing up?
My poor late mom. She sent me for 8 years of violin lessons, twice a week, Monday and Wednesday. I'll
Oh
never forget
my.
it. And I used to come back and just bash her cake tins with wooden hangers because I just wanted to be a drummer.
Yeah.
That was it, and that was all. And when I finished school, I declared that was that. I was going to be the next Alex Van Halen or the next Neil Peart or
Yeah.
one of the great drummers, or John Bonham. And so I said, right, I'm off to America. And my dad said, really? How are you going to get there? And I didn't know because my
Okay.
dad was not a wealthy man and I didn't have money to go. And he said to me, I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal.
Yeah.
Get your law degree. Go to university, get your law degree,
Okay.
and then when you graduate, at graduation, I will give you a ticket to America and I will pay your 3 months living expenses there so that you can go and try and pursue this dream.
Wow.
Now, while I was at varsity, my dad died.
Oh dear.
But at graduation, and I did well, and I found that I really enjoyed law. I did well, and at graduation, my mom came up after the grad and kept his promise and handed me the envelope with the tickets and the money and said, off you go. And I lasted 3 months in LA before I got my butt seriously kicked by the wonderful drummers that exist in LA, you know, and I realized I still got a bit to learn. So I came back to South Africa.
Okay.
And you know, then I became a practicing lawyer for a year, and it was okay, but I really found that something else. You know, my two loves are firstly music and secondly law, and my third love was discovered to me when I was in my final year because they made me into a tutor and they made me lecture, and then I realized that I loved lecturing, and so for 6 years I lectured at Wits University as a senior lecturer in the law school there, and so now my mission then and my passion then was to try and combine these three loves: music, law, and teaching. How do I do that? And that's how the academy came about.
And you've done that so well, hey? And I mean, from someone who was lecturing criminal law to getting criminals in the music industry.
Yeah, it's not far off, let me tell you. It's not far off. I mean, the way that I came to that realization was just like every other musician.
Yeah.
We got ripped off. Simple.
Okay. All right. So you guys were opening for Mango Groove.
No, they were opening for us.
Oh, there's levels to this.
No. Mango were just starting out. They'd released their first album.
Yeah.
Just released it. And we were the biggest pop band in the country at the time. And they were our opening act.
That is so cool.
And we went on this thing called the Summer Rave Tour. I think it was 1989, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And it really was a successful tour. I mean, we were, you know, in the days when number one meant that you were getting played on 20 radio stations 20 times a day. We had like, I don't know, 11, 12 number one hits. And in the days when having a platinum album meant that you were selling 500,000 physical copies every time, we had 3 platinum albums. So we were big, right? We were rock stars, right?
Absolutely.
So you'd think we'd have the Ferraris and the Lamborghinis and the Porsches and the houses
and all
on
the
hill,
chicks and everything
and the Bentleys
and the private jets, the whole thing. Yeah.
Well, not so much, because there was just never any money. And
what do you mean?
I mean, we were just having such a great time. We were just seduced by the glamour, the glitz, the lifestyle. Anyway, we kept on asking for money, and we just never seemed to get any. But there was always, oh, there's the next tour, and don't worry, there's the next album, and whatever the story was. And then we went on this particular tour that I've told you about with Mango.
Yeah.
And we filled every venue in the country. It was unbelievable. There were queues around the block I mean, Standard Bank Arena in those days was 15,000 people, including the basketball court.
Jeez.
Good Hope Centre in Cape Town, there was 22,000 people.
Wow.
Full. Port Elizabeth City Hall, you name it, Witbank Town Hall, wherever. We filled every venue in the country, and we came back from this tour and we thought, okay, well, we're all going to be superstars and mega wealthy. Well, the manager disappeared. We couldn't find him.
No way.
So we called a band meeting and we couldn't find him anywhere. And eventually tracked his wife down. She said, I don't know, I think we're getting divorced. I'm not sure. I don't know where he is. So the manager was out of the picture. So the band was looking at me and saying, okay, Mr. Fancy Pants, advocate of the High Court lawyer dude, What do we do?
So this is firstly your guys' manager.
My band.
And
yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And my band were looking at me over there and saying, okay,
Hey.
lawyer dude, help.
Hey, because you are a lawyer, right?
What do we do?
Yeah.
And I had absolutely no idea, because you don't learn this stuff at university. You just don't. I mean, excuse me, I got the copyright prize at WITS, and the word music must have been mentioned once, if that.
Wow.
It's all patents and trademarks and corporate copyrights and so on. And so I also got the contract prize. And believe me, the contracts that we signed as the helicopters today are an embarrassment to me. I'm the music industry lawyer, contracts guy, right? I mean, they were embarrassing what I signed there. As a qualified lawyer, I didn't know what recoupment was. I didn't know what cross-collateralization was. I didn't know what liquidation clauses were. I didn't know what creative control were. I didn't know any of these clauses in our agreements. So I really didn't know. So from there, I went to see Derek Rabin, who was the only attorney who was doing any kind of music law at the time.
Okay.
And Derek helped me a lot, spent a day with me. I'm very grateful to him for that. And he kind of got me on the path. But on that day, I realized how little I knew. So then from there, I went to see our record label. We were signed to Gallo. And the great Ivor Harberger, who's still a friend to this day, I went to him, Ivor, where's our money? And he said, okay, what money are you talking about? Are you talking about your needle time or your sales royalties? Are you talking about your synchronization of sound recording? What? I realized I didn't know.
Snap.
Then from there, I went to see the publisher. And I said, Warner Chappell. We were signed to Warner Chappell. I used to write some of the lyrics.
Jeez.
Where's our money? And I'd say, okay, what money, Nick? Are you talking about your performance royalties? Are you talking about your mechanicals?
Oh, my.
Are you talking about your synchronization? Reprographic. Which royalties are you talking about? Here are the statements. And then I really realized I knew nothing. And so from there, I had to learn. And Mango Groove, they also got ripped off. So Claire and John of Mango became my second clients, and then from there, people started to come and see me because now I was the only guy doing it. Simphiwe Dana and Sipho Hotstix'S Mabuse and Mac the Knight, and you name it, they all came to see me.
Yeah.
And I gave a lot of bad advice, and I made a lot of errors and mistakes, but I learned as I went.
Okay.
And then the managers and the labels and the publishers started to consult with me too. Some years later, because that gave me a more balanced view, and so now I understood their side of the story as well, and I was trying to sort of understand what a fair contract was now.
Okay.
And then from there, the CMOs, the collective management organizations, started to consult me. Samro, Capasso, I was the founding chairperson of Capasso. I put the whole mechanical royalties thing together in this country. Sampra, our needle time collecting site, because the labels were trying to keep all that money when needle time was reintroduced into South Africa in 2002 to 2006. And so I was the guy who wrote the legal opinion that resulted in the performers and the producers and the labels coming to an agreement, and that's a 450 million rand royalty today. So I did a lot for the CMOs, and then finally government started to talk to me and asked me to help draft some of the performance protection laws and some of the copyright laws, and that's where government and I started to part company.
Because I understand you were doing a lot of lobbying.
Yeah, I'm very anti the Copyright Amendment Bill.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. I doubt that you're watching, but Mr. President, somehow you'll get the message.
Yeah.
The state president firstly refused to sign it because it was just wrong.
Okay, what are the implications? What does the current act say, and what amendments were they proposing?
So there's, in essence, there's this thing called copyright, which is half of how we make money in the music industry.
That's a huge chunk.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, the two most important words in the music industry are not talent and fame, as I think I once said. It's contract and copyright, if money is important to you. Contracts are a whole different issue, but copyright is your intellectual property. It's kind of like owning a block of flats or a building like this.
Sure.
You own it, you can rent it out, you can lend it to people, you can sell it.
But it still remains yours.
But it's yours. It's your it's your property. Now, intellectual property, including your musical creations, are property. And you have a right to that property not being exploited without your permission or without being paid for it, if you choose to do so, just like the building.
Absolutely.
It's your choice.
Sure.
And
Dreamstream, a place to create yourself. Record video, music, and podcast in our full-service studio. Dreamstream, a place to create yourself. Record video, music, and podcast in our full-service studio. Dreamstream, a place to create yourself.
what the Copyright Amendment Bill seeks to do is to relax copyright, to make a whole lot of exemptions and exceptions to copyright. And the most notable is called fair use, which is an American concept, which is, people can use your copyright without permission, provided it's fair. And there are these very vague criteria as to what means fair and what doesn't mean fair. And this has resulted in not hundreds, but thousands of court cases in America. It's not been good for American creative economy. It's not been good for the world. Everywhere that fair use has been introduced, it's been a disaster. The Canadian book publishing industry was decimated by 30% because of a fair use type provision. So it's bad news for the creative industries. And don't let anyone tell you that it's good news. There is a lobby group out there who are trying to make out that it's good news, and it's not. The people who are behind it are the big DSPs, the digital service providers.
Okay, cool. Because I was about to ask, why would anybody want that then?
They want it because they want your copyrights for free and they don't want to have to pay you. It's as simple as that.
Sure.
It's not even economics. It's a simple one-on-one plus two.
Jeez.
So thankfully, the state president has now referred the Copyright Amendment Bill to the Constitutional Court because he says it's unconstitutional, and he's right. Thanks again, Mr. State President.
Nice.
And the Constitutional Court will hear the matter on the 19th and the 20th of March.
Okay.
And I have faith in our Concourt. I have faith in our judges, and I think it will be sent back to Parliament for complete redrafting, which will be great news for us.
That would be wonderful news, especially just looking at the situation with what's happening in the music industry in this country. That would be incredible.
Can you imagine, Lucy, if somebody else owned your podcast?
Oh, my goodness gracious me.
Can you imagine? Or even worse, if you owned it, and it's clear that you owned it.
But anybody can just use it.
But Google can just come and use your podcast without your permission and not pay you.
Jeez.
And then wait for you to sue them and say, it's not fair. That's what it would be. You wouldn't like that?
No, not at all. Not at all. And I'm really for artists, you know. I think I am obsessed with music. I love music, and I love to learn about the various aspects of music. So hearing that this is something that will actually benefit artists is a win altogether. You know, but Nick, earlier on you mentioned that you signed some terrible contracts that you kind of felt embarrassed about because you are the lawyer in the helicopters.
I've got them framed in my study to remind me, to keep me humble.
What did these contracts say? What was in those contracts that you felt like, oh man, this is terrible?
Yeah, look, Prissy, I spend an entire year teaching my students about this, clause by clause by clause, how to go through a recording agreement, a publishing agreement, an artist management agreement, a licensing deal, a P&D deal, or a distribution agreement, and all the variants in between.
Yeah.
So it's a long, involved, difficult topic.
Okay.
And it takes me a year to teach people how to navigate these waters. But in essence, I guess what I can say to you in a short environment like this is a good contract negotiation, a successful contract negotiation, is where both parties get up from the table and leave it slightly unhappy.
Okay.
Neither party should be completely happy.
Okay, cool.
Because then it's balanced.
Okay, cool.
But what is it that's important to you? If creative control is what's important to you, and you want to be the master or the mistress of your own destiny in terms of your art, and you don't want to be dictated to about that, well, then that's the clause that you have to negotiate very hard for in the agreement. That might mean that it costs you 1% or 2% on the royalties, because now the label is saying to you, but we haven't got that much control, so there's more risk, so now we're going to take another % of royalties. Maybe, but it's a swings and roundabouts approach. It's a balancing act.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are all kinds of clauses, hundreds and hundreds of clauses that you need to understand. For example, advances. Everybody thinks, wow, an advance, fantastic. I'm getting 200,000 Rand from a record label here. They're going to fund my sound recording and rock and roll. Good times lay ahead.
But people do need to pay it back.
But then you don't look a little bit further under the hood and you don't realize that it's recoupable, which means that the record company is going to pay itself back that advance out of your royalties before you see a cent.
Oh, snap.
So now, what are they? Now they're just an incredibly expensive bank. Then the question is, okay, what is recoupable? And how much is recoupable? Because some people end up in a situation where they don't sell enough to actually pay the recoupment costs back. And now they have to take that money out of their own pocket.
Oh dear.
Or sometimes it'll be recoupable from one album into another. So you might have the biggest selling album of the year as album 1, and then they throw the kitchen sink at album 2, and there's heavy expenses there. Now they're recouping for album 2 out of your royalties for album 1. So those royalties now stop all of a sudden.
Jeez.
So it's very complex.
Jeez.
And you've got to understand these things, and it's a very graduated kind of learning that's required here. You've got to understand step 1 to understand steps 2 to 10.
Okay. And I mean, you started consulting. I mean, you're mentioning Simphiwe, Hotstix'S, and you mentioned also that there's some advice that wasn't so good.
Yeah.
What is this advice that you gave that was actually quite bad?
Like, all labels are bad.
Okay.
All labels are con artists.
Okay.
That's wrong. Just like anything else, you get your good ones and your bad ones.
Mm.
All publishers are thieves because they want to control your copyrights. Actually, no. If you know how to negotiate properly, you can do what's called a copyright reversion clause,
Okay.
which would mean that the copyright vests in the publisher for a certain amount of time, but then it reverts to you after that. And then after you die, it can go to your heirs. These are the kind of niceties. There's no simple black and white in the music industry. And to begin with, the mistakes that I was referring to were black and white answers. That's bad, this is good.
Okay.
This is good, that's bad.
Okay.
It's not like that. It's give and take. It's swings and roundabouts. It's balancing this against that. And that takes a lot of detailed knowledge.
What is a decent contract? Because, I mean, people speak of a 360 deal and they're like, oh, 360 deals are terrible, you know? And other people speak on deals like, hey, currently maybe the record label owns the master, but I can buy my master back, sort of thing, you know? And you listen to all of these kind of deals and you're like, okay, there's some good things there. Oh, but actually, this might not be so good. What is a fair deal? You know, I mean, you did speak on nobody should be too happy, but what does it look like?
Well, it changes every day, first of all.
Yeah.
What is a fair deal today is not necessarily a fair deal tomorrow, and certainly not what it was yesterday.
Cool, because I could win a Grammy today, right?
You could. Absolutely, and I hope you do. And the point is that having won a Grammy, you might have a lot more bargaining power than a person who hasn't. That's really all a Grammy's worth at the end of the day.
Sure.
It's reputation and bargaining power. Right?
Absolutely.
But you mentioned the 360-degree deal. Now, that's an interesting one because everybody says 360 deals are the devil. Okay, so what is a 360 deal? First of all, you sign your sound recordings to a record label.
Yeah.
Okay. You sign your compositions, the underlying compositions which underlie the sound recordings, to a music publisher. Then you sign your management, which is all your merchandising and your touring and your live events and so on, and maybe even representing you in those first two, to a manager, because that's called the management contract.
Okay.
A 360-degree deal implies that you have signed all three of those functions to one company or one person.
I see.
All your eggs are in that basket. Now, it sounds like a terrible thing, right?
Yeah, kind of, because, I mean, we're told not to put all our eggs in one basket.
But everything in any one of these contracts is a terrible thing if you are signing to the wrong company.
Okay.
So, number one, there's got to be competency on the other side.
Yeah.
Number two, there's got to be honesty and transparency on the other side.
Yeah.
And those are hard to come by when you're looking for both. Now, a 360-degree deal means that you are literally putting all your eggs into one basket. And if that guy's not competent or that guy's not honest, you've got a real problem because he controls your whole career, all of it.
Gee.
Okay, now he can start recouping your recording costs from your touring or your publishing advance from your merchandise. Now, all those,
everything is there.
Now all those dynamics come into play, right? And a lot of people think that the 360-degree deal was invented in China because that's the traditional story. Yeah, the Chinese recording industry was in the toilet. There was all piracy there. Nobody was selling any records in China. And so the record labels had to become corporate sponsor type companies and merchandising companies and so on. And that's true. But actually, the first 360-degree deal that I can find in all of my years of research came from right here in South Africa.
No ways.
It was a company called Sunshine Records, and they signed a group called the Ragdolls.
Okay.
And that was in 1962.
No ways.
Yeah. And that's what my researchers told me was the first 360-degree deal. And of course, it was a terrible one. I mean, that band ended up in the appellate division of the High Court, you know, suing Graham Beggs, who was their manager in their record label, and you know, it became a mess. And they finally got out of the contract, but it really killed their careers because it was 5 years of litigation all the way up to the highest.
Jeez.
So the 360-degree deal can be terrorizing, definitely, no doubt about it. But it's like any other contract. You can negotiate a little bit on the swings and give on the roundabouts and give and take and balance it out. You can. There can be such a thing as a good 360-degree deal. If you ask a band like Paramore, for example, I don't know if you know the pop-punk band from Atlanta in America, Paramore. Haley Bennett is the singer. Fantastic band, great singer. Now, if you ask them, the 360-degree deal is the best thing that ever happened to them.
Okay.
Because they signed to a label called Fueled by Ramen, and they were then bought out by Atlantic. So essentially they were signed to a major.
Okay.
And they found that because they understood the 360 deal that they had signed, and because they'd negotiated it and the things that were important to them had been negotiated, it was fine. It actually took the pressure off Haley, because she found that instead of having to deliver the hit that we need now in the next 5 days, give us a hit now, you know, so that we can start making money. The record label actually took the pedal off, the foot off the pedal, and said, "No, we don't need a hit now. You know, work on your image, get your stage craft going." Why? Because we're making money out of your touring, and it's all transparent, it's all fair, so no pressure, and it worked brilliantly for them. The prevailing philosophy throughout the world is that no, 360s are not good. Because there are more bad ones than good.
Yes, and we hear obviously about all the bad ones.
You hear about the bad ones in Kanye. Okay, so you know, the bad 360s make headlines. The good 360s don't.
Absolutely, because they've got nothing to complain about.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like any other contract. You've got to know how to negotiate it.
Look, internationally, and I like that you're actually touching on international bands. Looking at South Africa, we are, I think, at one of the biggest times in terms of crossing borders internationally. But legally and music-wise, what does that look like for South African artists? And how does one actually protect themselves as an artist? Because you may not understand things properly if you're looking at a contract that's maybe coming from the UK or from the USA, because even just terms and terminologies are not the same.
Absolutely. There are so many people coming to me now with international contracts, German, American, British, French. Now, the rest of the world is interested in us.
Yeah.
And that's a fact. Why? It's not just Amapiano. It's not just Master KG and Jerusalem and that. The world loves this sound that we are creating here, and this sound can be broken up into various sort of subgenres. And yes, African hip-hop sounds fresh and new and novel to the rest of the world. And Amapiano is like, oh, whoa, what is this? We've never heard anything like this in our lives. But it's not just that. I mean, I don't know if you know that one of the biggest selling artists in Belgium, in Europe, brace yourself. Brace yourself. You ready for this? You ready for this?
I'm ready.
You ready for this? It's Steve Hofmeyer.
No
Promise you.
way.
Not kidding. Not kidding. Now, the point is this. That music sounds new and novel to the Belgians.
Dreamstream, a place to create yourself. Record video, music, and podcast in our full-service studio. Dreamstream, a place to create yourself. Record video, music, and podcast in our full-service studio. Dreamstream, a place to create yourself.
And, Afrikaans and Flemish are similar.
Yeah.
So there you go. Probably the biggest selling artist in the last 50 years in France is South African, Johnny Clegg.
Okay. I
Just-
could get it.
Numbers are numbers. The
Yeah.
numbers don't lie. Now, here's an interesting stat for you, Bussy. I don't know if you know this. There's a report called the IFPI report, International Federation of Phonographic Industries. Now, that's the recording industry worldwide.
Yeah.
So RISA, our local
Yeah.
labels association, reports into the IFPI, and they collate stats worldwide, and they tell us how the recording industry is doing year in and year out. And I've been reading this thing for a lot of years, decades, in fact. And a few years ago, something interesting happened.
Okay.
Normally it was South Africa, a little footnote on page 42, All of a sudden, Sub-Saharan Africa started getting represented as a territory in this report. And I'm going,
Wow.
hello? Huh? We got a half a page? That's interesting.
Hey.
The next year we got a page. I'll tell you why. Because about 5 years ago, the IFPI started reporting year-on-year growth in the Sub-Saharan African recording industry of 34.7%. This is 4 years ago, okay? Year-on-year growth. The year after that, 24.9%. You average it out,
Jeez.
30% growth year-on-year compound
Jeez.
every year until 2035 is what's projected.
That's
There is not a business or an industry in the world that grows that quickly. The Sub-Saharan African music industry is growing at 30% per year compound every year. Now, who's Sub-Saharan Africa? It's Nigeria, and it's us, and it's everybody in between.
yeah.
Essentially, it's Nigeria and South Africa. And so you've got Burna Boy and Wizkid and Davido and those guys.
Yeah.
But you've got Kabza de Small,
Yeah.
and you've got Maphorisa, and you've got our guys here. Who's bigger? Well, I drilled down into these numbers,
Okay.
and I checked these with Sampra, who know. And the fact is that 70% of that 30% year-on-year growth is South African, not Nigeria.
Huge.
This is the place to be. We have the healthiest, fastest growing recorded music industry in the world,
Yeah.
and the world wants our content. We had a music industry conference called Music Exchange, which happened at our academy a couple of years ago, and a guy came out called Mark Moreau. Now, Mark's a bit of a legend in the music industry. He was Island Records, who are universal in Europe. And Mark came out and spoke at this conference that we had, and I got to know him quite well. We had a lot of lunches and a lot of dinners. And over one of our dinners, Mark said to me, Nick, the next Bob Marley is coming from South Africa.
Wow.
Now, let me contextualize that statement. Mark Moreau is the guy who signed Bob Marley and lost his job over it because his boss was the great Chris Blackwell, a legend in the music industry. Chris Blackwell fired Mark Moreau for signing Bob Marley. He said, "What are you doing signing this dreadlocked, dope-smoking Jamaican?
My goodness.
Are you mad?" And he stuck to his guns and he became Bob Marley. Okay, so who was right and who was wrong? Mark was right.
Absolutely.
He also signed U2 to the Joshua Tree.
No way.
Yeah, for that album. He also signed Cat Stevens, and you name it. Mark Moreau was the guy. Mark says to me, the next Bob Marley is coming from South Africa. So in my typical innocence, I said to him, well, Mark, we've had Lucky Dube, but we're not that strong on reggae. He says, no, you don't understand me. I'm telling you that the next big breakout international star is coming from this country. And he's starting to tell me about Maphorisa and Master KG in particular, and Amapiano. He's saying, we love this stuff.
Yeah.
We love it. You have no idea. The next Bob Marley is coming from South Africa. Now, if anybody out there is listening, it could be you.
Yeah. I was even about to ask, I mean, is it Tyler or is that too soon?
Well, no, I mean, Tyler's already out, but she's not even regarded as South African
Yeah.
anymore. Tyler's regarded as New Yorker now.
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely.
But, and I'm very proud to say that one of our students produced that Grammy-winning song for her.
That is amazing.
Yeah, I'm very proud of that.
What's her name so we can get a shout out?
Yeah,
Okay, all right.
let me get his permission.
That's
first.
okay. That's okay. That's okay.
That Grammy award-winning song, that one. Okay, Water.
Yeah.
So what I was trying to get through here to your audience is that the rest of the world looks at our music and listens to our music and says, this is new.
Yeah.
Now, Lucy, I'm going to make a confession and admission here.
Okay.
Okay, I was a SAMA judge year before last.
Yeah.
And I had to listen to 43 Amapiano albums of 15 songs each.
Yeah.
And you know, they track you with the software to check that you've listened to every song.
Yep.
I wanted to kill myself.
Because some albums have like 23, 24, and you have to listen for like 90 seconds per song.
They all sounded the same after a while. I mean, I'm sorry to say it, but they did. You know, the music was sounding same old after a while. Not to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Not to them. To them, this is new. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we are also the fastest growing music market in the world. Africa, I mean. Why? Because 62% of our population is under the age of 26. Firstly, youngsters consume music.
Yep.
Secondly, internet access has finally become affordable and efficient.
Yeah, making the world so much smaller.
You can now afford your cell phone, your smartphone. And we have the highest penetration of smartphones of any continent in the world. You know, people have 2 and 3 phones.
Yeah.
And that's the whole of Africa. So we are the next market, because that's how we listen to our music these days, on that phone.
Absolutely.
And that, you know, think about it. Europe's gone, America's gone, Canada's gone, Australia's gone, Asia's gone.
Yeah.
The only market left is Africa. And that is why these overseas companies are buying into South African music so much. Sheer, our third biggest music publishing company, was bought quite recently by a company called Downtown, who in turn are owned by Universal. But in New York. Now, Downtown owns CD Baby and Song Trust, and those guys bought Sheer because they want these copyrights. Another example, Warner have just recently bought our biggest and possibly our best aggregator here in South Africa, who's called Africori.
Yeah.
Good friend of mine, Yoel Keenan. And Yoel has just sold his company to Warner.
Wow.
I don't know for how much, but Yoel's doing
I mean,
right. Thank you very much.
Africori is like up there. So, gee, that's
right.
Probably big numbers.
Absolutely. And why has that happened? Because Warner want these copyrights.
Yeah.
They want this music. The rest of the world is buying into South Africa. Be part of it, folks. You can be. The money's there.
But how do the South African artists then start to, you know, speak a decent language with these people contractually?
Yeah.
How do they go about that? What do they do? Do they call Nick and say, "Hey Nick, do they camp at ASC? What happens?"
Well, look, my story that I told earlier about getting ripped off was my story because there was no book, there was no course.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
There was a course at WITS, but it never taught me anything about the music industry.
Sure.
You know? So I had to learn the hard way.
Yeah.
School of hard knocks. That's why I made all those mistakes, and that's why I gave all that bad advice before I started giving good advice, and that's how my notes ended up becoming a workbook, which became a handbook, which then became my first textbook.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now the textbook's in the 4th edition, and once we've sorted the copyright amendment bill out, then I'll write the 5th edition.
Nice.
But in my day, there was no book. The closest we got to a book was Donald Passman's book, Everything You Need to Know About the Music Industry, but we're too afraid to ask. So I read that, but it's American.
Yeah.
And then I found out there was a British version, which is a bit closer to us, but still it's not South African.
Yeah.
The laws are different. So I read that one too. There was no South African book today, and really I'm not punting my book, I'm just saying there is a book out there. Go, read it, study it.
Yeah.
There are courses too. I run a thing called the Music Business Masterclass, which is a 3-month intensive program, Monday and Wednesday nights for 3 months. And, I've had guys like Salotto come on there.
Nice.
And his project was his own song, Trpa, which has been infringed 48 times.
Wow.
There's about $12 million owing to Salotto. So, that was his project. We've had Robin Cole on there, we've had Delta the Leo, we've had Maya Spector. Anybody comes and does that course. And we learn together, because not for a second do I think that I know it all. We all learn together during that course, and everybody at the end of that course, when we have the little award ceremony where we give the letters of certificates of attendance away, everybody says, wow, this is just the start of my learning. It's not the end, it's the start.
Yeah.
Because you've got to keep learning every day.
Absolutely. It's very important.
But if you have that foundation, there's no reason why you can't learn.
But do you see why I say that you're like the music industry superhero? Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah. No, there are lots of us who are trying to do good in the industry.
Sure.
And I can shed names. They'd probably kill me if I did. But there are good guys out there.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people in positions of massive power who do a lot more good than they do bad.
Yeah.
I can tell you.
Yeah.
You just got to know where to find them.
Sure.
And I'm no superhero. There's Batman and there's Robin, and I got lots of Robins. And there's Superman and Spider-Man too, and they're out there.
Yeah.
But if you come armed with knowledge, that knowledge that I'm talking about, royalty streams, copyright, contracts, those things, if you come with basic knowledge, you will be taken seriously in the boardroom. You will be courted by those who are the good guys.
Yeah.
They will respect you from the beginning because you're talking the right language. You obviously come from a foundation, from a base of knowledge. That means these good guys are going to come and find you.
Yeah.
And that's
That
the
is so
message.
real. That is so real. I was having a conversation with Kutlwano Nhlapo. So he was involved in trademarking the Amapiano word as soon as it started becoming very popular. And what he said was that the music industry does not need any more artists. It does not need any more vocalists, any more producers. The music industry needs more artist managers. The music industry needs more people who are behind the scenes, who understand the business of music more to help the artists. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I agree with Kutlwano. I think he's right. We need more knowledgeable people in this industry.
Yeah.
There's only one thing more dangerous than a dishonest manager, and that's an incompetent manager.
Ooh.
And I'll say that.
Yeah.
It's worse to have an incompetent guy running your career than it is to have a dishonest guy.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And, you can argue that most of them are both. Or you can argue that most of them are one or the other. But I'll tell you this. The manager is supposed to be there to protect you, be your shield, and protect you from all the ravages of the industry.
100%.
But who's going to protect you from him if he's either not fully competent or not fully honest?
Yeah.
Who's going to protect you from him? Only you. And you need that knowledge to do that. And I promise you, your manager is going to be better because you have the knowledge.
Yeah.
Yes, you might be playing your guitar and doing your gigs, but if you have that business knowledge, you've always got one little eye on him, and you'll know that your mechanicals are supposed to look kind of like that.
Sure.
And your performances are supposed to look kind of like that, and your royalties are supposed to look kind of like X, Y, Z. You'll have a notion, and that keeps him honest, and that keeps him on his toes, and that keeps him competent, and that keeps him hustling for you.
Yeah.
If you don't have that knowledge, you will fail, no matter who your manager is.
Who's one of the most notable or notably knowledgeable artists that you've come across who may not even have these kind of problems?
No one. There's no one that has never had these problems.
Yeah.
But there are people who have learned from these problems and have come around to understanding that they need this understanding. I can mention many. Salotto is one of them. I've got an enormous amount of respect for
And
Salotto.
he's such a legend.
Because he came into my course, and this man was a legend. He's a legend.
Yeah.
And I was actually a bit dumbfounded, to be honest, when I saw him sitting there in front of me. But he came in humble.
Yeah.
He came in armed with that book. He read it every night. He did the readings. He was ready for the next session. On the Monday, I would say read 42 pages for the Wednesday. They would be read, marked. He'd come to me with questions before he had he'd put in the hours.
Very diligent.
And so Lila walked away from that course beaming with knowledge. That's the only thing I can say.
Yeah.
And I've got a lot of respect for that, because he was prepared at this stage of his career, which is advanced, let's be honest, to get humble and say, I need to know more. I'm coming to learn more. And he did.
Staying teachable has so many wonders, I guess. It's so beautiful. But looking at your career, it's so interesting because you've literally experienced so many aspects of the music industry. But is there a point where you're just like, wow, if I can get there, I'd be so happy? Like, is there something that makes you feel like, wow, there's so much more that I still want to do? And what would that be?
Look, I still play the drums.
That's great.
The day those drumsticks come out of my hand, I become irrelevant, because then I'm just the lawyer guy. You get what I'm saying? It's I've got a gig on Friday night, this Friday.
Yeah.
I'm playing with it's Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day, by the way.
Thank you.
And this band has asked me to go and play a few songs with them, and I'm going to do it.
That was so
I'm
cool.
doing it because if I don't play anymore, I become irrelevant.
That's so true.
And so that's why I will go to my grave with a pair of drumsticks in my hand. But do I want to be a rock star anymore? I don't know. Hey, I wouldn't mind, but I'm probably a bit long in the tooth for that. The next challenge for me is, once we've settled this whole copyright amendment bill, the next big challenge for me is to rewrite my book into its 5th edition, update it, and once again dedicate it to my kids. Then I'll be happy.
That's very, very beautiful. And if there's any form of advice you'd give to an artist who may not be knowledgeable, and to be honest, even artists who are established may not even be knowledgeable about half of the things you've just said in this conversation, but what advice would you give artists right now in this era of music?
Great question. You need 3 things to be successful in the music industry. The first one is musicality. Nobody can give you talent. Only God can give you talent. But there are people and institutions that can elevate your talent to the next level, nurture you. You need that. And don't labor under the misapprehension that it's okay not to know chords, and it's okay not to know the difference between an E minor suspended 7th and an A major. You need to know that stuff.
Sure. Because
you're in studio, and studios cost, and studios are expensive, and you need to be quick. And when you're communicating, don't play this chord, play that chord. It's got to be quick and effective. So you do need to be musical. You need to understand some music theory, but you need to have that musicality. That's the first thing. The second thing is you need to have technical knowledge. You've got to know your way around a studio. You've got to know your way around production and pre-production preparations and post-production and music for film, and what the different mixes are, and what the difference is between an MP3 mix and a 5.1 surround or a Dolby Atmos mix. And you've got to know your way around the technical side of the industry, because the days of just signing to a record label who will do that all for you are gone.
Literally.
Number one, record labels don't look at you anymore until you've got a track record of successful releases on TikTok and Instagram Reels and YouTube under your belt. And number two, maybe you want to hold on to your copyrights and you don't want to sign to a label.
Exactly.
In which case you've got to know it anyway. The third thing you need is what I've been rabbiting on about, which is the business knowledge. You've got to understand royalty streams. You've got to understand business models. You've got to understand CMOs, where to go and get your money and how much is owed to you. You've got to understand copyright. You've got to understand contracts. Those 3 things, if you have musicality, technical knowledge, and the business knowledge, there's absolutely no reason why you should not succeed in the music industry. If you're missing one of them, you will fail.
That's very powerful. Thank you so much for coming through, Nick. Thank you
Very
for making
welcome.
the time. I do hope that after the whole Copyright Act that we can make time again. When you do have time, please no pressure.
I'll come in with some champagne.
Yes. But I really do appreciate it, and wishing you all the best.
Thank you, and the same to you. And I wish you all the very best with this podcast. You're doing a wonderful thing here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. The one and only Nick Matzukis, a legend. I'm telling you, a legend. And of course, make sure that you do comment. Tell us your thoughts about this wonderful conversation. And, maybe if you've got some questions, who knows? Maybe he might come back there in the comments and respond to your question. I don't know. I didn't ask him, I didn't ask him. You never know, man. But I do really hope that you enjoyed this conversation, that it was insightful for you in as much as it has been for me. Make sure that you do press that subscribe button. Don't forget to tell us what kind of conversations you would love to have right here on Music Politricks. If you'd like to use the studio, maybe you want to record your own music or actually record your own podcast, all you need to do is send that important email. It is info@dreamstream.co.za. Kalina Kennabusi, Baba Kulu, Baba Des, Bariki the Queen of Pitori, and Erona, we are outie. What's up?